Welcome to my presentation of dyscalculia. It's a learning disability in the area of math. Students with dyscalculia will struggle with simple brain condition that causes them to struggle with mathematic skills and basic mathematic concepts. They struggle to acquire basic arithmetic skills and struggle with basic number facts, and really this is going to affect each person a little bit differently depending on where they have these struggles. So they may struggle with things such as 5 apples are the same as 5 cakes, or they may struggle with things where they can't do simple arithmetic, like 5 plus 3 equals 8. Uh, they can struggle with multiple other areas as well. These are just some of the most common things that they will struggle with dyscalculia. But, as I said, everything is a little bit different for each person. Is it dyslexia? About 50% of people show no problems with math if they have dyslexia. So there is a connection, but it's not necessarily the connection of the math is the problem. It may be that the language that's used in the math questions is the problem, or maybe it's something as simple as they just can't see the words or the words are moving. So those are potential issues, but it may not necessarily be the math that is the issue, but it could be. So you could have both. You could be dyslexic and dyscalculic. You may have one or the other, or you may have some link between dyscalculia and something like ADHD. Typical things that students struggle with if they have dyscalculia: number sense, so that idea that 5 is more than 3, or that 5 cakes is the same as 5 apples, something like that. Memorization of arithmetic facts, so 2 plus 2 equals 4. Those things they'll struggle with at times. Accuracy and fluent calculation, so they'll be able to do the arithmetic steps, but they will struggle with doing them fluently or struggle with doing them correctly when they get to applying them to something. And then just general accurate math reasoning. So they'll struggle with the ideas of when to use a plus sign, when to use a minus sign, things that people of their same age group and same ability level in other areas will have mastered. These students will really struggle with, and they will really have a setback in these type of areas. These are not the only ways that they can be dyscalculic. These are just probably the most common ways. So remember, everybody is a little bit different, but these are probably the most common. Symptoms that we see a lot: trouble learning to count, trouble sequencing, and trying to put things in a pattern. I saw a video of students where they really struggled with the idea of 2, 4, 6, 8. They could get 2, 4, and then they wouldn't understand what came next in the pattern. Even after a brief explanation, they would still struggle considerably with something like that at an advanced age. As students get older, things such as number lines, telling time, they'll struggle with. So these things kind of build from the fact that they maybe didn't have the best math facts to start with, and they've been using some kind of coping mechanism to help them get through those things. So the idea that I have 15 minutes later as a reference and it's 4:15, they'll really struggle with the idea that that is actually 4:30. They won't know what to do and how to get to that solution for what time they're looking for 15 minutes later of. As they get to high school and maybe middle school, the things such as measuring ingredients, reading graphs and charts, and trying to pull information from graphs and charts can be a struggle. Again, these are things that students will struggle with just in general, but a student with dyscalculia will struggle with this after a significant amount of work, time, and after they've progressed to an age where this should not be a struggle anymore based on how their peers and others do and things like this. Just because their peers are doing them and they can't doesn't necessarily mean it's dyscalculia. It's just one of the options. How it's diagnosed: in general, you would go visit a doctor. The doctor would make sure it's not something like ADHD or dyslexia or something that's a little bit more easily diagnosed. Dyscalculia is a illness that doesn't have a cure. It has things we can use to cope, and there's not a lot known about it at this point. So how it's diagnosed and what it gets diagnosed and then what gets done about it is something that's definitely kind of a gray area. So getting diagnosed with dyscalculia is a multi-step process, but there's really no steadfast one answer to how you get diagnosed with dyscalculia. You can have a dyscalculia screening done at a hospital or potentially by an educational professional such as a school psychologist. They'll perform some tests. I've provided one such example. This is one such example just to give you some ideas of questions that students may struggle with. That doesn't mean they're going to all struggle with the same questions, but these are types of questions that they may struggle with, and that could be given to them by a psychologist in an educational setting. They're going to look at records, performance on other tests, standardized tests, and things, just to see that this is a trend that is occurring, not necessarily just a fluke, or maybe they've gotten to a class where it's a little bit harder, or they don't have those connections, so they're struggling for that reason. And it may include some observations. At that point, you may be diagnosed with dyscalculia, and then we can do some things for you. These things can be done before that, and obviously some of these things are going to connect to dyslexia as well, such as using color, trying to break down large things definitely helps with ADHD. Photocopying math books is not necessarily just taking a copy of a math book, but you're taking all the extra stuff out. So it's more like photocopy and then copy and paste. So you're taking away all the extra pictures, all the extra words that you don't necessarily need, and trying to streamline things and then put it in a more logical and organized fashion. Math textbooks are not always the most logical, the most organized, so taking those and breaking them down a little bit. Using different fonts, such as Arial font, gets rid of kind of the tails and the extra parts of letters and numbers, so that when things are typed, it's clear what is a letter and what is a number, and that definitely helps students negotiate through when I'm doing something with math and when I'm doing something in an English sense. Those things are all kind of that, just in general, they will help students. As far as things that you can use to help specifically in math, using graph paper, so the little boxed paper, that allows students to keep things very organized as they work through a problem. They can go straight up and down and work themselves through problems very simply by staying in those columns. I say simply meaning by staying in those columns. Obviously, it is not simple for somebody with dyscalculia to do something like that, but that can potentially help them. Using a calculator is definitely a great coping mechanism for the students who really struggle with arithmetic skills. That's something that they can use to hopefully alleviate that, which will hopefully alleviate some anxiety for them, which is definitely another issue that students with dyscalculia have, is they have definite math anxiety, which is understandable because they are trying hard to understand a topic and they just cannot get it. Playing math games at home and in the classroom also will help students with dyscalculia to just learn those simple facts, start to learn different coping mechanisms, and hopefully start to recognize things as they go. Just in general, little is known about dyscalculia. Throughout all my research, I kind of found the same information, and they all kind of said that there's not a lot that's known about it at this point. It's something that's becoming more and more talked about, and at this point they think it's about as common as dyslexia, but they're not 100% sure how many people have it, because it gets misdiagnosed as ADHD, or students with ADHD and dyslexia have symptoms of dyscalculia, and there's really no good way at this point to distinguish between the three as far as math goes. Dyscalculia can't be cured, so it's something that students are going to have for their entire life, but as they progress, hopefully they're learning those coping mechanisms and things that can help them to be successful with math, so that as they continue and have to balance a checkbook someday, have to pay bills, they have ways that they can do that, that they've learned throughout the process of having this and throughout the process of school. The last thing I want to say is being bad at math doesn't mean you have dyscalculia. If you work hard at math and it's a basic skill that you're really struggling with, you may have dyscalculia. If you work hard at Algebra 2 and you just don't get it, it may not be dyscalculia. That's probably just you don't see a connection, or it's just not your favorite subject. Maybe you're not putting in as much time, something like that. So being bad at math does not necessarily mean you have dyscalculia. And finally, just please enjoy the rest of my presentation. I'm trying something a little bit different here. It frees me up to answer questions and ask questions of you. and it gives you a little bit more freedom to explore different things. I provided a couple links for some YouTube videos. I provided you with the test to look at, a works cited page to please explore. The website's on there. There's lots of great information on those. And I also made a Quizlet of just some basic facts and basic information. And finally, if you could please take the survey that I provided, that would just give me more information, more feedback on how this type of presentation kind of went and if it was successful or not. So thank you, and please enjoy.